This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Jackie Nguyen of Cafe Cà Phê in Kansas City, Missouri. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. If you haven't subscribed to Keys to the Shop, please hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share these episodes with a friend, and rate or review the show. If you love what Keys to the Shop does, it would be so great if you would leave a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts. This really helps the show in the rankings and helps more people find this content. And I thank you so much for doing that. Now, on top of doing this podcast, Keys to the Shop also offers consulting for you and your business. Now, there are a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop consulting can help you in your coffee business. I want to highlight one of those. I do both remote and in-person consultations and training. But in particular, I want to highlight the on-site cafe assessment. If you're already an operator and you want to bring things in your cafe to the next level, this is a great option because I'll show up to your store and spend 2 to 3, even 4 days with you in the shop, observing your baristas, the customer flow, asking questions, doing interviews, and generally just investigating what's going on with the operations, the quality, and the people that make up your business. And at the end, you get a report with my findings, suggestions for next steps, and continued coaching after that visit is through. So that is one of the ways that Keys to the Shop consulting can help you. Several of my clients have gone through this and have really loved the process. You can read some of those testimonials over at keystotheshop.com/consulting. Now, if that's something that appeals to you and you want to learn more, let's set up a free exploratory call. Just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com, for more information. Again, that email address for Keys to the Shop consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the best suppliers of specialty coffee equipment in the world. Not only do they curate the best equipment from all over the world, but they also work with you to make sure you're getting the right equipment for your business. And that kind of support is really important because it's a big investment to put into equipment when you're just starting out, or if you're expanding or upgrading your commercial equipment. It's a huge investment, and you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. And that's one of the great things about Prima Coffee. They're all about helping you be successful in your coffee operation. Keys to the Shop listeners can get 5% off their entire order by using the code KEYS5 at checkout when you go to prima-coffee.com/keys. Use the code KEYS5 at checkout. That's KEYS and then the number 5 at checkout, and you get 5% off your entire order. It's really a great deal. Definitely take advantage of that. And if you're in the market for commercial equipment and you want to make sure you're working with the best, then I highly recommend you go check out prima-coffee.com/keys. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista series, a line of plant-based performance beverages that enables you to serve your customers the absolute best plant-based beverages they've ever had. The Barista series is designed for the specialty coffee community, and before anything ever hits your shelves, or before they launch a product in their extensive line in the Barista series, they bench test this stuff with some of the world's best baristas, making sure that it performs on bar. Gives you amazing texture for latte art. It stands up to the heat from the steaming process, and the final beverage is really focused on the coffee. All these things are definitely important for your customers, and it's important that when you're serving them, you serve them the best. I really think that you can't go wrong with the Barista series from Pacific. Look them up over on their website, pacificfoodservice.com. Get it in your store and try it for yourself and see what I'm talking about. I think you'll agree. The best option for you and your customers for all of your plant-based beverages is the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, I'm really excited for this Founder Friday. It is a long time coming. And ever since I met today's guest, Jackie Nguyen, I have wanted to have her on the show because she has such an amazing story. And I'm honored to call her one of my consulting clients, and it's been fantastic to see her progress from the start till now. You're going to hear the whole story in this episode. Now, Jackie is a first-generation Vietnamese American. She's a daughter of a refugee Born and raised in San Diego, California, after graduating California State University, Fullerton with a BFA in musical theater, she moved to New York City to pursue a career on Broadway. Some of her favorite jobs were performing on stage with Reba McIntyre, Ashlee Simpson, and many holiday seasons with How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the musical, and most recently, traveling the country with the Broadway revival tour of Miss Saigon. Now, after 10 years of being a New Yorker, 10 international and national Broadway tours, she decided to make a career pivot and relocate to Kansas City, Missouri, and pour her heart into Cafe Cà Phê. After 8 years of being a barista, a trip to Vietnam, and yearning to be an entrepreneur, the idea for a Vietnamese coffee shop was born. And I'll tell you, you won't meet somebody more passionate in this game of coffee entrepreneurship than Jackie. She brings an incredible energy and authenticity to Cafe Cà Phê. And in this conversation, you're going to get to hear the story of how she pivoted from acting to coffee, having to overcome the challenges that COVID laid down for both that and developing the concept itself, how she demonstrated resiliency, networking, building relationships, creating something that authentically and unapologetically represented her culture and also acts as an advocate for many others who are marginalized in the Kansas City area and beyond, really. Jackie is one of these amazing people that has endless energy, and it shows in what she's created. I'm so excited for you to get to hear her story. Here now is my conversation with the founder of Cafe Cà Phê, Jackie Nguyen. Well, Jackie, so great to have you on the show. Finally, I've wanted to have you on for so long. How are you?
I'm doing so great. This is such a weird moment for me. So full circle.
It is a weird moment. I feel like you're a client of Keys to the Shop Consulting, but we had met up somewhat serendipitously in Louisville, and so. I mean, we'll get to that, I suppose, in the story, but it is full circle. It's pretty funny. But I've really wanted to have you on the show for a while. Your story is I think, a great success story and very unique as well. So let's kind of start from the beginning here. You come from a background in Broadway, but now you're in coffee in Kansas City. So how did this first start for you?
Well, I had been an actor for about, 12, 15 years. I lived in New York for about 10 years. And during my time in New York, I was a barista. You have to find side gigs to kind of get money and hustle while you are auditioning. And so being a barista was a huge part of my life ever since high school. And so I was a barista senior year of high school, all through college. And then about 4 or 5 years of me living in New York, I was also barista. But I would tour a lot. So majority of my acting career is tours. So I would tour with national shows around the country. That was like my main gig. And I guess how I got into coffee now is I was recently on the Broadway revival of Miss Saigon, starting in 2018, and that was going to be a 2-year tour. So while I was on that tour, I started thinking like, am I going to do this touring forever? Am I going to be an actor forever? It started to really wear on me. I turned 30 while I was on the tour, and I kept thinking like, looking back on my career, I was really proud of all the things that I've done, the places I've traveled, but all I had to my name was just a resume. And I started to get kind of disheartened from that because I was like, man, I don't really have anything to pass down to my kids, or I don't really have anything that I can show other than maybe commercials or like footage of the things that I've done, but nothing really tangible. And I started to do a lot of community work while I was on the tour. I served as the Vietnamese language consultant for Miss Saigon. There's lots of Vietnamese spoken in the show. And so that was my new role that they added for my, other than performing. I started really doing a lot of press events. I started really talking about the cultural aspect of our show. And I kind of felt like, wow, I don't know, I want to do a little more for the community, a little bit, something that could have more impact, a little bit longer lasting than, an audience, enjoying the show and then leaving, which was great. I loved it. That's why I did it for so long. But there was something that I just felt pulled to. And so while I was on the road, I started thinking about different things that I could do, whether that is start a community center, whether that is, I don't know, maybe work corporately for, something that could impact the community more. But then we have like these little breaks that we take in between cities. And so on one of our longer breaks, I took a trip to Vietnam, and I had only been there once before, and it was maybe for like 2 days. So I didn't really spend that much time there. But then my boyfriend and I went to Vietnam, and he's also in the show as well. And we just loved Vietnam so much. I got to really learn more about, where I came from, my mom's country. I wasn't born there. So it was nice to kind of look around. And what I knew this about our culture, but actually experiencing it was just like another dimension. It was the coffee culture there in Vietnam is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The coffee shops there, the service that they have, just everything about the coffee shops there is almost like really different than what we have here in the States. And I just kept thinking like, oh my God, this is amazing. I wish we had this, in America, from the types of coffee to the culture to just, what it brought to the community. And so I ended up being really inspired from that. And I came back and I sat down and I was like, I think I'm going to open a coffee shop. But I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know, I worked at Starbucks, honestly, for, years and years and years. And that's all I knew. But I had no idea about, third wave coffee shops. I didn't know anything about owning a business itself. I didn't know anything. All I knew was acting, right? And show business. So that was really difficult of a transition for me because I was like, oh, I don't know where to start. So I kind of utilized my resources while I was on the tour because we would go to different cities every week. So I had about a year left of the tour, and I decided to really go all in on this idea. So every city that I would go to, I would find the local coffee shop nearest the theater, and I would message them, email them, and ask them, hey, I'm touring with the local show in town. And I was wondering if you had an hour of your time this week. I'm only here for a week. If I could sit down and talk to you about your business. So I would do that every single week. I would, and, like you said earlier, I just happened to tour through Louisville that week, and I had already reached out to you about consulting. So that's how we met, crazily enough.
And right, you didn't know that I lived in Louisville. You were just like reaching out
No.
to someone at the same time. You're just like communicating. We're like, hey, I'm all in the same city right now.
Yeah, I did not know where you were. I literally, at the time when I was researching everything, I started, trying to digest as much as I could. So I was downloading podcasts, and yours was the first one I downloaded. And I started listening to every single episode because I was like, I need to know, Founder Fridays and all these shift breaks. And like, I wanted to, really digest everything that I could whenever I could. And podcasts was easy for me on travel days, to listen to on the plane and on the bus. So when I knew that you offered consulting, I was like, yes, this is what I need. These are the tools that I need, someone to help me figure out what I'm doing. And so I reached out to you, and you're like, yeah, we could meet up on Zoom and da da da. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to be in Louisville. You're like, well, I'm in Louisville. It's like, what? This is crazy. So like a few days later, we met up, which was nuts to me. I guess fast forward, the pandemic hit and I still had about 4.5 months left of my show slated. So I didn't, at that time, none of us knew what was going on. But for me, especially, this coffee shop thing was still an idea, right? I still just was planning out the rest of my interviews for the next 4 months and trying to figure out who else I could speak to while I was on the road. I had just attended Coffee Fest for the first time in New York. Met you again, saw you right. Judging some barista work, which was really cool to kind of like immerse myself more. I met a bunch of vendors. I met a bunch of people. That was probably one of the last times I had traveled. Then the pandemic, really blew up. And so my show ended March 15th, 2020, really abruptly. And we were just kind of, everyone just went into quarantine and our show not only came to a halt, but it ended like for good. So we were not going to have a show to come back to. And our whole cast, our whole crew, about of 100 of us were left completely jobless. Just like the rest of the Broadway world right now, there's still no Broadway shows happening right now. So that kind of gives you a timeline of how much work was lost.
Right.
So I felt really called to just go all in on this. So as soon as the pandemic hit, all the time that I had, I just poured into figuring out how to open up this shop and how to do it within the realms of the pandemic and financially with whatever I had left saved up from the tour. So yeah, I just really went completely 150% into this, what at that time was a project, and now it is a fully launched business. So
yeah,
that's a little brief, synopsis of what I went through.
That's a good synopsis. And excuse me for a second. That's a good synopsis. I it has to be said, so much credit to you for a great approach to researching, like asking people for their time, interviewing them. I mean, you could have started your own podcast in this time, honestly. You were doing personal Founder Fridays, basically. Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I did it once when I was like a very young baby barista with somebody in Seattle. And I don't know, how many people did you end up interviewing for that little project? I mean, how many did you end up accumulating?
I want to say over 25.
I mean, and you just did it because, like you said, why not? This is an opportunity. I'm going to go for it. And you know what that shows? That people are willing to also. Like,
oh my gosh, everyone was so willing. They were more than happy to, some people even have follow up with me still. I still talk to some people that I met. I've made amazing friends, like Mike from Ghost Alley Espresso in Seattle is one of my dearest friends now. He's a huge supporter of Cafe Cà Phê. And I met him, while the tour was in Seattle. I had nothing. We actually met on Halloween. And I remember because he was dressed as a nun. And, he sat there for hours just giving me so much knowledge and so much input. And a lot of these questions that I asked were kind of personal, and not just personal, but like required a lot of information, resources. Like I'd ask, like, is this lucrative? Do you enjoy it? Where did you get your funding? What are some of the best vendors you've worked with? And people would tell me, I felt very honored that they were so willing to help me.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great story, and so much of what you've learned, obviously, you've put into practice. And of course, I'm honored to have been a part of that story and to have, seen the evolution of this concept and your growth over this past, well, it's over a year now. But you started with the idea of doing a brick and mortar. I remember that was the thing. There were spaces scouted, floor plans examined. We were looking at that very in depth.
Yes.
And then it was just like, as this pandemic was happening, it became obvious that something had to change. Talk a little bit about how, when you jumped into it 150%, you needed to switch things around. How did that go for you? And what did that do for you as somebody who had really had your heart set on a brick and mortar, now having to think hard and long about, like, is this actually going to work?
I attribute my life as an actor and I really am thankful for, being able to be malleable to situations. There's lots of things that could go wrong in show business. There's times, our lights go off, or, costume piece is missing, or, while you're auditioning, you are in final callbacks for a Broadway show and then you don't get it, so I'm kind of used to heartbreak and I'm used to things changing on the fly. So that was not as difficult for me to readjust my ideas. But what was difficult for me was the logistics of it all, because I had studied, I had tried and figure out this floor plan and the budgeting, and I had gotten, bids from different contractors. It was like my first time dealing with any of this. So when I wrote my business plan, it was like a 40-page business plan. All the details were done. And as we were, you and I were discussing different options, I was meeting different landlords. I was talking to different banks, and, a bunch of restaurants in Kansas City actually had started to shut down during that time. This was June 2020. A lot of places were still extending their shutdowns. And so a lot of landlords were like, this is a brand new concept and you are bringing this new idea to a city that is in the middle of a shutdown. I'm not sure this is the right time. And that is completely understandable, right? Like, these landlords and these banks would be taking a huge gamble on a new business, especially when these types of businesses were in the middle of shutting down, and not being able to sustain themselves. And these are like Kansas City staples, right? Like coffee shops and restaurants that have been in the city for years. So why take a chance on me? So as we began to realize that was a thing, you had brought up, hey, have you ever considered maybe like a food truck, or maybe a mobile, situation, or maybe a small cart, that you would usually see at different events like catering. And I was like, I don't know. I was really disheartened by that idea because it just wasn't the vision that I had. And part of my vision and my plan was to create roots so that the community, the Asian community, especially in Kansas City, could have a place to go to. And having like a mobile cart and like a food truck didn't sound picturesque to what I had originally planned out and mapped out, right? When you think food truck, you don't really think coffee shop, right? You think like tacos and like, different types of food like that, not necessarily coffee. So I had to really just think about the vision that I had. But I don't know, you know me very well. I'm really tenacious and I really want things to happen. And
for sure.
I started thinking like, why not? Why not? And you actually really encouraged me because you mentioned that, I can make the cart or the trailer or whatever it is. I can still bring the culture to people. And maybe it would be a solution to, COVID, right? Because at the time we didn't know what was going on with coffee shops. We didn't know what was going on with any type of service industries anyway. And people were just doing to go. And having like a mobile service is essentially to go. No one's sitting inside. I can just like bring my coffee to different places of the community. And the more I like mulled over it and discussed it with you, I was like, wow, this could be actually a really brilliant pivot. And, you know, as soon as I had my mind set on pivoting, I again went 150% in and was like, okay, we're going to do mobile. This is what's going to happen now. So we decided to do mobile, and I am so grateful that I did it. Because I was still able to open. I was still able to launch my business within the time frame that I wanted. I still filled my time with something that I loved, and I was able to reach the community in various ways. And I was still able to give my coffee and my ideas and the culture out to the city. And now, you know, it's still mobile, and I find that it was meant to be. You know, I'm a person about like whatever the universe gives you, you go with it. And I really felt like at that time, for my journey specifically, I was supposed to pivot in that way. Again, you know, I was already pivoting from Broadway to coffee. And then the universe was like, well, one more pivot. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things worked out. I mean, in tragic ways, I suppose, like the loss of your job gave you the ability to focus 100% without thinking that it was just going to come back anytime. You know, you and I working together was really, like I said, there was some serendipity there, but just the work that you put in, they talk about how the more you work, the luckier you get. I mean, the interviews and everything, you had prepared yourself to respond to these opportunities very well. And like when you talk about how you made up your mind around our conversations about a trailer or a mobile operation, when you say that you just made it happen, I mean, I think people need to realize just maybe you might be understating it when you say 150%, because you got that thing like up and going quick, like yes. Really quick. We were texting back and forth. You're sending pictures of trailers, and it was just like boom, 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 like made it happen. Leveraged your network like crazy to get artists involved, electricians, coffee suppliers, everything else. It was really amazing to witness. And so I guess two things. One, you talked about bringing the experience to the people of Kansas City, especially the Asian community. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more in depth about that experience, because it's not just a coffee trailer, or it's not just a coffee company. It's rooted, it's culturally rooted in Vietnamese coffee culture you mentioned earlier. And then from there, talk a little bit about the logistics of getting that thing going, because it wasn't, even though you made it happen fast, it wasn't an easy process.
So like I mentioned earlier, when I was in Vietnam, the coffee culture there is much more of a lifestyle. It is not a place where, you meet up and you stay there for like, a good hour and you leave. It's a place where you literally stay for hours, and it's, you can see the coffee shops full at all times of the day, but mainly people come after work and they enjoy a cup of coffee and they sip it, over the course of hours, and they just take a break from work. It's like, they don't want to go home yet, but they don't want to be at work. So they go to a coffee shop, and the baristas, the coffee shop owners, they treat their customers like their family. They are very involved in their lives. They know exactly, where they came from with work. They know their family members. They often, there's a customer service voice here in America that we use. That doesn't exist in Vietnam. It's like, oh, hey, Chris, what do you want today? Instead of like, hey, how are you? Did you have a good day today? Like, there's none of that. And I loved that. I felt very much like as soon as I walked up, I felt like I was, their cousin or their daughter. And it's kind of abrupt, because, it not often are you welcomed in that way where you're like, okay, come in. What do you want? Like, okay, great. And it's not mean. It's just like they're treating you like, you're a family member. I just love that. I loved it because it made me feel like I was super welcome to come in. They were like, come in. Okay, so where are you traveling from? What's your name? Oh, okay, cool. Like it was just, I don't know, the way they treat you made you feel like it was your home, but it wasn't your home, right? But you could stay as long as you wanted. And sometimes they would even like bring out food that you didn't order and was like, here, try this. It's really good. Like, okay, like, thank you. I love that. I just love that. That's not something you see a lot with coffee shops. And I wanted that. I wanted that experience, and also the coffee itself, the way that it's brewed, the way that it's made, the taste, it's much stronger of a taste. It's very bold. It's very caffeinated. And I was like, man, I love this. It's everything I want. And so I really wanted to bring the culture to it because for us in Vietnam and in the Vietnamese culture, like I started drinking coffee at a very young age. Like Vietnamese iced coffee, my mom would make, and I would take a sip from her cup, like maybe starting at 3 or 4. And it was just a thing. It was just like part of our culture where you got to experience the tastes. You got to experience like, sitting out. And a lot of, you'll notice early in the mornings, sometimes in really heavily populated areas that are populated with Asian communities. I mean, like San Diego, Orange County, Seattle, things like that. A lot of Starbucks, they have, kind of gone to these Starbucks in the mornings to try and emulate what they have in Vietnam. So there's actually like, I noticed that while I was working at Starbucks, like early in the mornings or late in the afternoons, these large communities of like older Vietnamese communities, like lots of Vietnamese men, lots of Vietnamese women would start gathering at Starbucks because it was like the only coffee shop they could go to kind of emulate that experience. And I kept thinking, man, I wish I could have that for them where, they could have items on the menu that they could recognize, flavors from home, and also bring that experience to people who didn't know or who has never had Vietnamese coffee or has never been treated like that at a coffee shop. And so that was something I really wanted to bring to Kansas City and to America. I wanted to bring the cultural nuances of what Vietnamese people are used to. And that goes into difficulties of my trailer because sometimes you need a place to hang out. You need a shop. That's why I was like, no, I need a brick and mortar, Chris. Like, you don't understand. I have to serve like it in a cup with the slow dripping style, and people need to be able to sit there. But it just wasn't going to be part of the narrative then. But that was okay. Again, I discovered that, in order to just at least start with the base, which was the coffee itself, I could eventually grow it, and give the other experiences later.
Well, it's a very immersive experience, though, even though it's a trailer. I mean, the way you've crafted the menu around Vietnamese iced coffee and then the branding and decor, I mean, like you go into that, even though it's not a brick and mortar, it feels like you've entered into one.
Yeah, I was really conscious about that because I knew that if I'm going to do a trailer, I got to make it super cool and also very, very well thought out. So with my branding, I made sure that, every aspect of my brand, from the colors to my logo, has part of the Vietnamese culture. And I wanted every little nuance, the flavors, the different beans, everything that I do, I make sure that the culture is engraved in that because I wasn't able to have a brick and mortar, right? Because when you walk into a space, you're able to kind of craft a room into an experience. And I knew that I didn't have that. So I wanted to kind of like make sure that if they walk up to the trailer, or they can see the trailer from far away, or they can bring a cup of coffee away, that they can bring that experience with them. So I made sure that there was not a part of my shop, my trailer, that didn't have some aspect of the Vietnamese culture or the Asian culture. Because one of my main goals was not just to open up a coffee shop, but to open up a coffee shop that could have impact. Like I said earlier, I felt like I didn't have anything that I could pass down to my kids, or anything that was really tangible to impact the community. And so I thought a coffee shop, a place where people can go to, a place where people love to have conversations. I wanted to make sure that my coffee shop could be a place that could amplify the Asian narrative. And especially in a place in the Midwest where, there's not as much representation for the Asian community. I felt like, wow, this is my opportunity now. Even if it's mobile, even if it's on wheels, let's still do that. Let's still make sure that, when my trailer is driving by you, there's this huge dragon and you're just like, what is that? And like, I want to raise questions. I want to start conversations, and I want to be able to have a place where if I'm driving by and someone's Vietnamese, they immediately know what that dragon is. They feel recognized. They feel like, wow, there's something in this city that, cares, that cares about my voice, that cares about the Asian voice. And so that was really, really important to me, to continue to make sure that no matter what I did, from social media to the coffee to the events that I hold, or where the events that I served at aligned with that, that I continue to make sure that I can serve coffee, bring that experience to people, and also make sure that while I'm doing that, I'm amplifying the culture behind the coffee. I don't really see that often in coffee shops. So I wanted to make sure I did that.
That's such a great point, because I think, especially if you're talking the Midwest, maybe coastal cities are a little bit farther ahead in terms of deeper cultural appreciation. But, if you're talking about the Vietnamese culture, you really are only going to think of a Vietnamese restaurant. Or like here in Louisville, for instance, there's lots of Vietnamese grocery stores and restaurants, but they're kind of the mindset of people who are not Asian, I think, is it relegates that to a very accepted and particular place, right? And what you did, you could have easily just gone with, the classic coffee bar menu and had one item that was Vietnamese iced coffee, and did this in a way that was just like, okay, here's the formula, here's how it works. I want to be successful. I'm going to do this. But your impact immediately is to not only draw out that appreciation for Vietnamese culture and Asian culture, is also to, open up coffee to broader concepts than just the formulas that work because we're scared to lose money or we're scared not to be successful. So you kind of took a risk in a sense, but obviously didn't feel like a risk because you were being true to yourself and your culture in the process.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was risky. I also didn't know any better. I didn't come from, any experience in the coffee world. So I just knew like that this doesn't exist now. I'm going to try and make it exist, and hopefully, it works. And I didn't have anything to lose. I had nothing to begin with. So, I didn't have a job. And so to me, I was like, well, I might as well hope that this works. And if it doesn't, well, then I'll start something else, because I don't have anything else to go to, So I guess that's, in a way, I feel lucky that I was a little naive in not knowing that it was such a huge risk to be as bold with my choices, because I didn't know any different,
Yeah, well, we're all grateful that you were naive / bold / true to who you are. So, as you're talking about, bringing this to the people, it's what you wanted to do with the brick and mortar, but especially around COVID, but even outside of COVID, there is a hesitancy with people that want to give loans or opportunities because the concept itself is not that well-worn concept. So to them, might seem like a risk, you know. Mm-hmm. How did that work when it came to bringing the trailer to the masses in the process of like finding places for the trailer to go, in the logistics of actually getting it off the ground?
It was really hard. I had to then do research into food trucks, right? It's a completely different industry than the restaurant industry. And I think it's unbelievable that it's not more connected because, I don't know, you're a restaurant on wheels. But there's a whole different set of permits. There's a whole different set of rules for food trucks. You know, there's a whole different pamphlet for food trucks itself that is separate from the restaurant world. So I had to dive into that knowledge, because, you know, when you're mobile, there's so many restrictions as far as how far you can be from a stop sign, a police station, a fire station, a local school. There's tons of way more like minute and crazy details you wouldn't think about until you are actually opening one. Then also you have to think about, oh my gosh, the traveling, having to reset up the bar every single event that you go to. So if you think about it, this is something I did not realize. When you are driving your trailer, things will move, right? So I had to make sure all my syrup bottles, all my equipment was on the ground, not on top of the counter. So I had to like ratchet strap my espresso machine to the counter, put all my grinders, my brewer, my syrups, my cups, everything had to be strapped in or put into bins on the floor. Because if I were to stop, you know, or have like a stop sign or a stoplight, things would fly off the shelf. And I had to baby proof all of the, you know, the drawers because they would open if, you know, I made a turn. Those type of logistics, those types of things I did not expect. So that was the hardest part because I was like, wow, this is going to be a moving element. You know, movement is a huge element to this. And I have no idea what I'm doing. So that was really hard. And luckily, the community in Kansas City is amazing. And so there's also a food truck community here. And I joined all the Facebook groups and all of the groups that you could know of the food truck industry. And I would ask questions again. And there's a few people who are specialize in like food truck build outs. And I got to meet one of them. They came in and honestly saved my life. They helped install all the plumbing, my, you know, pitcher rinser, my ice my ice bin, my sink, everything. I was able to really work with the food truck side of everything to make sure that my trailer was up to code, was functioning, but it was really, really hard. I mean, every single week was a new thing. You know, I had to build out serving windows. So that I had to contact a contractor for that. The next thing was an electrician. The next thing was, you know, plumbing. And I had to get, and another thing with food trucks is every county is different. So you have to get a different health permit for a different county. I was just really overwhelmed by that because I don't know. I felt like, man, this is not what I signed up for, but you know, I have to do it in order to figure this out, you know? So that was a journey. But I did it fast, which was great. So I bought the trailer, I want to say, August. I think I bought it like the beginning of August, and then it was fully launched and functioning September. So I took about a month and it was like fully done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not only that, but I think it was even like 2 or 3 days after we had talked about doing a trailer, you bought it.
Yes, literally. Like we said, let's do a trailer. I said, okay. 3 days later, I bought one.
Yep. You're like, man, this is real. I was in my kitchen and you sent a text of it and I was like, wow, this is it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you went through this gauntlet of, red tape and paperwork, and all of these things that are the guts of a mobile operation. And once you got it up and running and you had to bring it to different locations, and that in itself is not easy to do. I remember having conversations about where to reach out to and how to, like, who is going to host this trailer, where are you going to go to get business? Talk a little bit about, now that it's mobile officially and you've got it painted, coffee's in there, it's ready to go. The step after that, how did you get everything up to speed where you started to get gigs that were semi-regular and started to get a little bit of traction?
Yeah, that was really difficult too, because again, COVID, right? A lot of places where they would usually have like summer or fall festivals weren't actually happening. So that was a really, really hard. So what I did was I would drive around the city and I would look at different places that I saw a lot of foot traffic, and I would kind of see, okay, where's the nearest coffee shop around them? Because I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm going to pop up in front of a coffee shop, So one of the first places that hosted us is this vintage shop / plant shop / yoga shop. And the building owner is an amazing, amazing asset to the Kansas City community. And her name's Laura, and she totally welcomed us and was like, you can park in the parking lot. You can serve here anytime that you want. Just make sure that we are aware of when you set up and when you leave. And that was one of the first times I ever drove up into a parking lot and served it. And I just but I had to call her, I just would call different shops and was like, hi, I'm a brand new coffee truck. I'm looking for places to serve coffee. I don't know if you charge for me to be there, but I'm willing to pay. I just want to get my name out there. Most of these places didn't charge me at all. They just would yeah, you can totally park here. We'd love to have you. So I would do that over and over. I would look at bookstores. I would look at different art festivals. And then one of the biggest events that we booked is this event called Strawberry Swing. And it's one of Kansas City's biggest arts and crafts fairs, where it's just all local makers and they sell all of their handmade things. And they usually host food trucks. So that was one of our biggest events, but we were really intimidated because the other food trucks that were there were Thai food and waffles and things that were really well-established food trucks. And then it was us pulling up, and I've never done an event like that. I had no idea what the capacity of, that I could do. It was a nightmare because I had no idea. First of all, you have to use a generator for a trailer. You can't just plug in your trailer somewhere. I didn't know that the generator would run out of gas eventually. So the generator would stop and my entire trailer would lose power. So, oh my God, things like that, where I would run out of ice and then I couldn't serve ice drinks anymore. Run out of water, couldn't do anything. So I'd had to shut down. On my way to certain gigs, I would get a flat tire on a 5,000 pound trailer. I didn't know what I was doing. Oh my gosh, ran into when I tell you, not just finding events was difficult, but just actually figuring out how to run the event itself was really hard, really hard. And I was just doing it alone. And then one of my friends would help me. But I was doing it by myself, alone, driving it by myself, just me, running the register, running the bar. It was really intimidating and really scary. But luckily, a lot of these places that would book us were so kind and would understand that I was brand new and they just wanted to help. So, but finding a place was really hard. It still is. It still is pretty difficult because you are trying to make sure that when you book a place, you can make money doing it, because you have to buy materials. You have to there's only a limited amount that you could put into this trailer. That's it. You don't have a storage, closet. You can't go to a fridge. You don't have an ice maker. You're just in this trailer. So you hope that when you book a gig on a Saturday, that you can make enough money that people will come, so that all the supplies that you've prepared doesn't go to waste. It's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Well, it's not, it's opening a coffee shop every time, like in a new place.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Physically and just mentally. Yeah. You are introducing the concept to a new neighborhood, to a new demographic of people. And then physically you are doing the same. You're setting up every single time, putting the syrups up, putting the brewer and the grinder up on the counter. Oh gosh, it's very hard.
Yeah. So, I mean, you did that for a while though. And we were having conversations during this time about, this is hard, and you had just yourself, and it's a heavy trailer. It's like you said, breaking down on the highway with this thing. It's a real stress test, I think. And you persisted in the midst of that, even though it was exhausting. And it seems like the community really started to take notice as you persisted with this, as you built your online presence as well. I think that was also very helpful, and something that I think you've done really great work in, is being consistent with how you represent your brand online, Instagram specifically. But at what point during this process, even through the tiredness, the weariness, and difficulty, did you see this really taking root, to use that term, with the community? I mean, the response, I think, has been pretty great.
Yes.
But was it that way right from the beginning? And when did that really click for you?
Well, before I even had the trailer, I would do these little pop-ups where it would just be me and a table and a little, square stand. And I would just sell the Vietnamese iced coffee. And I did that kind of like a lemonade stand, very, elevated lemonade stand, I guess. But I would just sell the coffee so I can go meet the community. And so I could just establish awareness of what I was doing. Then I got the trailer up and running, and we had our grand opening on Halloween. And I feel like that was maybe the first step of the community really showing out. We had people waiting in line for coffee up to an hour. And that was a really amazing moment for me to see this line out the door, not just out down the block, but down another block, down another block, down another block. I was like, what is going on? Of course, it was Halloween. We encouraged everyone to dress up. We had a bunch of different activities for people to come. And it's a grand opening, it's something new. But I think that was maybe the first little trickle of what I thought was wow, we have amazing support, Then, as you and I spoke, you kind of made me realize, you were like, what are you going to do during the winter? And I was like, what do you mean? And you were like, what's a food truck? It's going to freeze. And I was like, oh, crap, you're right. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I was just so busy pivoting that I did not realize oh my gosh, this is a food truck. Food trucks don't function during the winter. The pipes freeze. People don't go outside. What am I going to do?
Especially where you are.
Especially in Kansas City. Yeah. So I started scouting different places that I could put my trailer inside. And luckily enough, there was an amazing, amazing company here called Firebrand Collective. It's a co-working space. They asked us if we would be interested in, being part of their team as far as just serving coffee out of their warehouse. They have a huge warehouse. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So we set up a temporary winter residency where our trailer would be inside of a warehouse, and we would set up a temporary, like 3-month thing, right? From like December, January, February, during the coldest months. It was during this residency, we made it happen. We put our trailer inside and we started like telling people like, this is our temporary location. We set up little tables and chairs. And so it became like a very like, I don't know, experimental brick and mortar situation. But it was during this residency where I felt like this is where we got the most support. Because it was during the holidays, people were looking for different things to do with their families. So they would come visit our shop. Then, you know, in the new year, we had Lunar New Year, which is like one of the biggest celebrations of the Vietnamese culture. So we did a lot of promo around that. And I think during that point, we started to see the community really pour out. Like we would have regulars come in every day or certain days of the week. Like they would always come in. We would have people bring us gifts. Like there's not been a week since we started this residency where we haven't had some type of gift, some type of lunch, or something gifted to us, because the community here is just so supportive and so amazing. But I think it was around Lunar New Year when we saw that the community was really paying attention. Our Instagram following really increased rapidly by the week. You know, I would see at that point, I think we had maybe like 1,000 followers. And then in a week we had 2,000. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like what's going on? But I feel like, again, I'm very, resourceful, and we saw that there was this huge warehouse space. So I started asking the landlord, hey, could I host different pop-up events here? Since other businesses let me pop up there, I think it'd be cool if I could host other events here. So I started collaborating with the community hardcore. I knew that, you know, Black History Month was coming up, and I wanted to really amplify, you know, Black owned businesses. So for the entire month, I would host different pop-up events where I wouldn't, you know, I would just ask different Black owned companies in town to come up and sell their merchandise with me every weekend. And I think that, that aspect raised awareness of our coffee shop, because people were like, who is Cafe Cà Phê? Like, why are they hosting all these like different events and stuff, you know? So that would raise, you know, people to come in and ask us like, who are you guys? And we're like, we're new, you know, we're a coffee shop in town, but we love the community and we just want to amplify like our voices, because we feel really marginalized, and we feel like other communities that are marginalized deserve to be amplified as well. So like we started really making that part of our, you know, our journey too. And part of our core values was to help amplify marginalized communities. So I think that really sparked conversations and sparked the community coming out and being like, wow, that this small coffee shop that's brand new is already trying to make some sort of impact with different communities, you know, and I just kept doing that. I loved it. So I just kept doing that. And I think that it's kind of led me to where I am now.
As you began to see traction and bring this culture to the community, I think it's so interesting how it's both that and you serving the community and celebrating the community in and through what you do and what you've been given in this time, the opportunities that you've been given. So that's such a huge lesson, I think, to all of us. Like, again, I think as an entrepreneur, it might be easy to simply like focus on your bottom line and focus on your thing and bringing that to more and more people. But you had the wherewithal to just kind of say, no, I'm going to kind of pay it back or bring it full circle, because you had been benefited so much by community, from the interviews you did to the help with the trailer to everything else. It's really a good testament to your heart for the community. So when you started this, like you mentioned earlier, it was a brick and mortar kind of, you know, because you had one space now that you were living, and you didn't have to strap things down because the trailer's not moving. And so you also added people to the mix, like you added staff to this.
Yes.
Talk about the transition between being fully mobile to now basically fully immobile, or kind of that brick and mortar taking on staff, and the difference between the two and how that's evolved.
It was amazing. Just to say that right off the bat, it was amazing. One of my best friends, her name's Madoka. She was also on the tour with me. She had nothing to do either. So her and her husband moved to Kansas City to essentially help me. Wow. And that's, now she's the manager. My staff is really small still. I mean, I only have about 6 people. And 2 of them are actually just volunteers because they felt bad for me because I was just taking on so much. So they're just like, we're going to help you for now. So when I say staff, I take that very lightly because I'm still in the middle of figuring all the logistics out about that. But, when we set up this residency, we really set up shop. We added tables, chairs, we added a merch table. We have like a couch now, it's actually a functioning brick and mortar, right? Like I have systems set up to I know what to do in the morning. I know what to do at closing. It was just a really amazing look into the differences between being mobile and it's physically much easier to obviously have the shop that just stays there because I don't have to lift all the heavy equipment and strap it down and do all that stuff. But also I've been able to create a place where people can go to. So like I said, I've had regulars, we've had people that come in every certain day of the week that they do their study groups there. We originally were only supposed to be there for 3 months. Now we've been there for 5 months because it's gotten so popular. We asked to extend our residency and the landlord said, yeah. So for 5 months now we've been there, and the difference is amazing. We've grown so much where I've had to hire 2 more baristas to help because just me and Madoka working there 5 days a week was just not sustainable. We didn't even have a lunch break. We still don't really have a lunch break. So it's kind of like we still function as if we're a food truck, but just inside, it's a definite mix of the two. It's a mixture of still functioning out of a food truck and then a mixture of, a brick and mortar. And it's been amazing to kind of figure out that transition. All experimental, every day is different. We're still figuring out, the best ways to order, how much, storage we can, have. And it's been very, very fun and adventurous, but it's also been very difficult as an owner because I am having to be so flexible, right? I can't, for example, because we weren't really sure how much coffee we would serve on a daily basis. And we don't have a fridge, a huge fridge. We just have a small undercounter fridge. We can't really store a lot of milk. So the milk that we buy has to be on a every other day basis. And I can't really set up an order for, a type of delivery service because I don't have a place for the milk to be placed. Right. So it's definitely still hard to figure out the logistics of everything, but it's still really fun because every day is different. And at least for me, I've really, really enjoyed the community aspect of getting to know the community, having regulars come in. We have families that we know by name. We know, we've been invited to family dinners, it's been awesome. So, but hiring and asking people came as a blessing and not as an opportunity. Honestly, I didn't seek out to hire. These people just kind of ended up being there at the right place at the right time. And we had an event where we were just so slammed, and one of our regulars, who actually is a barista for many other coffee shops in town, we just love him. I was like, Jason, can you help? And he's like, yeah. He jumped in and helped. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it just fit. It just worked. And he knew exactly what to do. He had been a manager before. He was a barista. He's a first generation Mexican American. So he understood the cultural aspect of the importance of like what we were pushing. And now he works for us. I was just like, do you want to work for us? He's like, yeah. So now he works for us, so I didn't seek out a team. It just kind of happened organically. And I feel very blessed in that way because, I don't know, whatever the universe again has been blessing us with, I've just kind of been like, oh, okay, I'll take it. Yeah. It's been a journey.
So the customer base that you developed while mobile, how much of that did you get to transfer over to the warehouse where you were stationed as a residency? Did you see a lot of the same people come from the various events that you had been doing?
Oh yes. They are very loyal. The food truck community actually talked to me about that. The loyalty of the customer base, that they will follow you wherever you go. And that sentiment is real. Like, definitely. There are people that are some of my most regular and amazing customers that were even at my little, pop-up that wasn't, the trailer wasn't even there. My little, I put my little stand outside of a local nail shop. Some of those people are still having coffee from me.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, but a lot of people worry, especially if you just started with a brick and mortar, changing traffic patterns, changing habits. They're like, how do we get people to change their morning routine? But it's actually pretty cool that if you start with that truck or that trailer, people already factor that in, that this is going to be in a different place. I'm already signing up to have to be flexible with where I can get this. So even if if and when you open that brick and mortar, which we'll talk about in a second, your customer base loyalty has already got a lot of patience and flexibility built into it from the beginning.
Yes. And I think that because we all as a world didn't really know what was going on during COVID, I had to be very transparent with a lot of people. I had to be like, hey guys, I don't know if the trailer is going to work today. We're going to be there. Sometimes my generator would stop working. So I'd have to be like, hey, we can only serve certain drinks that don't require the espresso machine. Hey, I got a flat tire, not going to make it today. So people had very mixed expectations. My expectations were just like, I don't think I had any because none of us knew what was going on at the time. So I think my transparency with everyone too would be like, hey, just letting you know, I'm not sure if this is going to work today.
Mm-hmm.
I think people kind of like appreciated that because it brought a sense of like realness and like humanity to the business versus pretending like I had all my stuff together, right? Like there's no business out there that truly has everything put together. If they do, they're faking it. Like they're just as stressed. They're just as, naive. They're all just figuring it out as they go too. So I was very transparent in that. I would be like, look, I don't know what I'm doing, you guys, but I will figure it out. And people loved that. So I think that my transparency helped with loyalty.
Yeah, 100%. And more, I think, especially we're talking about authentic expression. We're talking about rooted in things that are rooted in culture. And you can't put on pretense when you're doing something like that. And
yes, right.
So that is really an amazing point. And I think I see that a lot more in, these days, especially as, online people seek to really represent their brand well online beyond the sort of played out, highly curated Instagram photos of where it's just like everything is perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a great Instagram account and you've got great photos, but when you read the content, you realize that this is a person and these are people. And this is the kind of stuff that people want to be connected with, especially because of COVID in how we were so far removed from each other. So now, a question I have, I guess, is you in 2020 versus you now. What's been the biggest difference? Because it's an emotionally taxing thing. It's not just the business part of it. It's also like blazing a trail culturally, and not everything has been amazing, as a result of that. But it has to have impacted how you view not just the business, but who you are as a person. So how has that evolved? How have you evolved?
Well, I did not understand the impact that my coffee shop would have until now, I think. I knew I wanted to have an impact, but I guess I didn't realize the weight of it. Especially, I knew that with COVID, there were lots of attacks on the Asian community, but my focus was to amplify our voices in a place where we didn't feel recognized. But I guess I didn't realize that there were places that really, really needed it. And I think that I unearthed this version of myself that I didn't realize I was going to be, I guess, because for example, yesterday I had the immense honor of speaking at City Hall with the mayor of Kansas City and other representatives of Kansas City.
Wow.
And they held this event that officially made May the AAPI Heritage Month of Kansas City. It was not recognized before in our city until now. And the fact that I got to be a guest speaker at that just kind of shows you the impact and the weight that I didn't necessarily plan for, right? That is not what I thought this would be. I thought, my shop would be this like new, cool place, and like I would really broaden people's horizons. But as unfortunately hate crimes increased and the Asian community suffered more and more, it became apparent that the Asian community here not only wanted their voices to be amplified, but they felt really hurt and they felt really invisible. And it was this extra weight that I did not know or had experienced before. And so I think how I have evolved is that I feel like I'm not just a coffee shop owner now. I feel like it is more than that. What I represent, what my coffee shop represents now is way more than what I anticipated and what I planned out in the beginning. But I love that. I love that it's transformed into that. And it has done that only by me being myself this entire time, which is really surprising, but also like really an awesome feeling too, that I could just be completely 100% myself. Like I'm so transparent online, almost too transparent, where, but the community has really felt like, a tie to my shop. There have been multiple, I want to say dozens and dozens of people that have written or DM'd me or emailed the shop and have thanked me and said like, this is the first time I've ever felt like someone cared about me in Kansas City. Or this is the first place I've ever felt safe to be Asian in Kansas City. Or I've never seen my culture represented in this way ever in my whole life. Or I've never been proud to be Asian before now. Those are some statements that are really heavy and really like way more than what you would expect from a coffee shop, right? And so I think how I've evolved is that I've taken on a different role as far as a coffee shop owner. I feel like I am trying to balance that and also be kind of a representative of the Asian community for Kansas City. And so I think I've evolved in that way where I haven't changed who I am or how I've been, transparent online, but what I've received in return is just so much bigger than I expected.
That's such an honor. Wow.
Such an honor.
I mean, in the coffee shop itself, as you're talking about that, I think it always has, throughout history, been a place for people to gather to tap into something deeper than the coffee itself. And it's interesting that, in third wave coffee, we have been pretty much about the coffee. It is the extractions, it's the tools, it's the, coffee nerd stuff. And for a while, it seemed like that was a lot of what was going to carry us through. But the human element is a lot deeper than the largest cup of coffee you could find, really. And it's no surprise that if you set out to serve your community like the way you have, that you're going to unearth these parts of the community and yourself that are not going to line up with just latte art or, pictures of, slowly pouring coffee on your Instagram stories. That stuff doesn't speak to people's hearts, and what you've been doing obviously has resonated beyond what people are used to having something resonate from a coffee shop.
Yeah, I think that before those type of photos, the focus on the actual coffee itself, the extraction, like the notes. I think before, when that knowledge wasn't available, that was interesting to people, right? Because you were like, oh, wow, I never knew this about coffee. But now that we all kind of know, right? Like there's so much knowledge out there about coffee, and there's many people brew their own coffee at home now, and they have the knowledge of that is so universal now. Like not a lot of that is new to people anymore. So to me, at least me personally, I kept, from the research that I did too, I kept thinking like, man, these people are super passionate about the coffee bean, like the Colombian, the Ethiopian, and But I was like, but what about like the people behind that? Like, what about Ethiopian people or like Colombian people? Like, do they drink coffee in their cultures? Do they celebrate that? And like, what is another layer that we can unveil behind the coffee? Like it's gonna need to, grow, and it's gonna need to be more than just about the coffee now, because I feel like the way the world's moving, it's more about the human experience, right? And that's great. I think it's wonderful that we're educating people on coffee and like how to properly brew and how to properly drink, and what is roasting, and people are roasting their own things at home, so that's wonderful. But I think that what is going to be harder is to tell people like, hey, there's culture behind what you're having, and you should be bringing some of that back home. You're going to be wanting to understand a lot of what you are consuming. And I think that is something that I think, and I hope that a lot of coffee shops start doing, asking their employees like, hey, is there a coffee culture at your house that you do with your parents at home? Like, can we highlight that? Can we amplify that in this week's social media post? Like I just think there's so many ways to be creative with it without having to really like sacrifice your knowledge of actual coffee.
Right. I mean, well, they go hand in hand, and I think it's a false dichotomy to say like, oh, you can have one or the other, but you can't have both, because obviously, as your menu item, says you can have a hella good latte.
Yes.
And you can have the ube latte and all of the Vietnamese iced coffee, the menu that you have, and you're educating people on coffee, and you're making great coffee, but you're also bringing people together, and not just in a overused phrase or mantra. Like bringing people together is what every business plan that starts a coffee shop says. Mm-hmm. But you've obviously done a really good job in this. And I'm so excited that we got to hear your story. We could talk a lot more about things that have gone on and the story behind this. And it's only been a little over a year, and not even that, since you've been operating, but since this was a dream to reality. So it's been an honor to talk with you and work with you in this process. But The last question, I guess, is what's next? I mean, what are your plans for this business as you continue on through 2021? What's on the horizon?
Well, we are moving out of our winter residency now that it's summer. It's going to be summer soon. We're going to have a summer residency. We found an amazing business in town that is going to host us in their parking lot for about 3 months. We're going to be serving outside. So we're going to bring the truck back out because there's been a lot of people who've asked like, hey, are you guys coming back outside? That's like one of the biggest questions that we've gotten. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time. So we are going to go back outside. We're going to have like table benches and umbrellas. It's going to be more of like an outdoor type of deal for at least the summer. And my hopes is that while we do this, and since I have extra people on my staff now, I have a little bit more time to really focus on actually getting a brick and mortar. And so my goal is to open a brick and mortar by the end of the year. I'm hoping my goal, if I put it out in the universe and online right now, is Halloween. Yeah, my truck was open on Halloween last year. So I was like, oh man, that'd be super cool if I opened my brick and mortar on Halloween. So that's my goal. I've got a more solid business plan now that I've been in operation. So, and people are a bit more adjusted to COVID. And so I'm hoping I'll have more luck with leases and banks and crowdfunding and raising some capital for a brick and mortar, because I do feel like it's going to be the next step after this summer residency. So that's what's next on the horizon. I'm really excited to do this outdoor thing because we can do music and we can have parties and safely distanced, of course, and, according to whatever guidelines the county puts out. But I'm excited because we get to kind of change it up a little bit. You don't see that often with coffee shops, right? Like you can't really change up your environment too much. So I'm excited to see what happens and what opportunities come about from that.
That is so exciting. I look forward to seeing that. And how can people stay in touch with you? Where can they go to learn more? Your website and social?
Yeah. We are on Instagram at Cafe Cà Phê, CAFECAPHE. I run all the socials. So if you are DMing us, that's me that you're talking to. We're on Twitter. We also have our website, www.cafecafe.com. And we have a Facebook. So any of those platforms, you'll probably be talking to me. And I would really encourage you to follow us on Instagram. We really have a lot of fun on there. And that's something I really enjoy doing all the time. So definitely check us out. And if you're in Kansas City, check us out in our summer residency. We'll be announcing where it's going to be very, very soon.
Absolutely. I can't speak. Absolutely. Yeah. Just stay in touch with what's going on. And I encourage everyone to do that. Even if you're just outside Kansas City, you should probably just make it in to go there. But Jackie, again, I'm really glad we got to get on this call and talk about your story. It's a great story and you're doing such a great job, and really thankful to host you on a Founder Friday.
I am too. This is such a crazy moment because that's all I was listening to before. And now I get to be on it. Oh my gosh, it's just an honor. So thank you so much, Chris. And thank you for all your help. Seriously, you've been so instrumental in all of the things that Cafe Cà Phê has done. So I can't thank you enough.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. One of the things I enjoy the most about Jackie, and this interview in particular, is when confronted with a challenge, there is a lot of thinking involved. There's a lot of assessment, but not endless thinking and assessment. There is a let's do it. Let's go 120% in and make it happen. From getting that trailer in 2 days to finding a place to put it when the weather turned cold, learning how to do all of this in her spare time, just researching before she even started the concept. That combined with the mindset and heart to not just celebrate and represent your own concept, but also those around you in your community, has led Jackie to see great success with Cafe Cà Phê. So a huge thank you to Jackie for joining us on the show. It's really been fantastic to have this conversation, and we cannot wait to see what's next for Cafe Cà Phê. If you want to follow along with Cafe Cà Phê's progress, you can follow them on Instagram at Cafe Cà Phê. That's CAFECAPHE, and also on their website, cafecafe.com. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me, then feel free to email me. Chris@keystotheshop.com is where you can send that. It's also where you can inquire about Keys to the Shop Consulting. Again, that is Chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our episode today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad you got to hear the story of Cafe Cà Phê. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, I hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.